joyful hello to all of you. My name is Minnku Buttar, founder of the Circle of Joy that brings you self-mastery programs and retreats. It gives me great joy to bring to you this season's talk show, a series of interviews on choosing joy, secrets, and stories from all over the world. It is my diligent attempt to show you that joy is not a hockey-pocky, frivolous concept, but a discipline, a way of life much needed if you want to be resilient, radiant, and unstoppable like a runaway train. So subscribe to my channel so that you can tap into the wisdom of people from all over the world. I will see you there. Hello and namaste. My name is Minnku Buttar, your host from India, and welcome back to the 7th episode of our talk show, Choosing Joy, Secrets and Stories from Around the World. Now, the theme for today's episode is moving from shame-filled life to a purpose-driven life. Now, my guest speaker today is someone who embarked on a journey of self-awareness and spiritual growth in his early 50s, when he realized that his own life was based on shame-based thinking that had hindered him from living a very successful, happy, and purpose-driven life. Today, though, he's a sought-after keynote speaker, and he guides people beautifully through the journeys of emotional healing, shame, and personal development. He's a published writer and contributor to Biz Catalyst 360-Degree Humanity Rediscovered, in which we both proudly share the forum. And he has successfully authored his first book, Shame on Me, Healing a Life of Shame-Based Thinking, which chronicles his struggles and triumphs over self-destructive patterns. Please join me to welcome my guest speaker for today, John Dunia. Warm welcome, John. So happy to have you here.
Thank you, Minnku. I know I'm just as happy as you are. I'm very, very thrilled to be here with you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I look forward to having these heartfelt conversations. And John, I'm quite sure you've been told this 100 times that your surname encompasses the world, because here on this side of the world, Dunia means the world. And perhaps your ancestors meant for you to scorch the world with fire with your research and impact. So were you aware it means the world?
Yeah, yes, that there's actually my great-great-grandmother, when she was born, it took her a long time for her parents to be born. And when she finally was born, she meant the world to them. And I believe it was Lebanon, in that area, and they named her Dunya, which is the Arabic word for world. And then for some reason, her son took on, he was John's son of Dunya. And so it's only about 5 or 6 generations old, the name.
Right. And I've been really fascinated. In fact, we share a lot of common forums, and that was the thing that was really fascinating for me, your surname. So, John, so let's go right into this and talk about that emotion, that mucks around it mucks our psychological functioning, our interpersonal processes, and that, of course, is shame.
Yes.
John, the more I read about shame, I find that many people confuse shame and guilt with each other. So my first question to you, John, is how would you define both from your perspective, and why is it even important to know the difference?
Well, I'm certainly glad that you asked that question, because that's the first thing that I go over with anybody, any of my clients, anybody who wants to discuss shame, because it is for me, in the way I teach and guide, it is extremely important, because they're difficult to distinguish, because physically, biologically, we sort of process the same. When we have feelings of guilt and feelings of shame, we have these same sort of feeling. Like for me, I get butterflies in my stomach, different things like that. So we process them, and so they're kind of difficult to really feel the difference. But I'm gonna explain the difference, and then I'm gonna tell a story that'll help understand it.
Sure.
Guilt is typically the feeling we get when we make a bad choice or a mistake.
Mhm.
where shame is the feeling we get when we feel that there's something intrinsically or innately wrong with us, that it can't be fixed. In other words, let's say we're having a discussion and then I get really angry with you, really upset, and I say things that just aren't called for, but it hurts your feelings and hurts me. I look at myself and I go, wow, John, you got to watch yourself. I shouldn't yell at somebody like that. You see how Minnku felt. You see how horrible you felt. I made a
Mhm.
bad choice by yelling at you. That's guilt. And so
Right.
guilt sometimes can actually be a moral compass to help us change future behavior,
Mhm.
where shame would say to me, John, you know why you yelled at Minnku? Because you're really dumb. You're really rude. You're really a mean person. And it's this intrinsic thing about me that I believe that I'm this horrible person. And once I believe it, it's a fact. And facts don't change. And that's the basic difference. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a pretty simple difference, but in the beginning, when people are learning about shame for themselves, because again, shame has many different levels to it, that's the best way to think about it.
Makes a lot of sense, John. And you wanted to connect it with an example. Was that what you were trying to give? That you imbibe the emotion and you feel you are it. You are the emotion itself, right? Versus,
Right, or you are like I said, if I yelled at you, it wasn't a bad choice or a mistake.
right.
Shame says you're a horrible person, or you're,
Mhm.
whatever the case is, you're too small, you're too dumb, you're, the wrong race, all these things
Yeah.
that we've learned, that people have told us,
Mhm.
that we've unfortunately learned to believe and take on as facts, as that's who we really are, and we're not.
Yeah, it just completely makes sense, John. And in fact, I read long time ago something Brené Brown said, and we were talking about this the other day when we had our conversation offline. That she said that the difference between shame and guilt is the difference between I am bad and I did something bad. So
Right.
I am bad is probably, John, so diminishing, which takes me to the fact, John, that really, is it true that shame can actually become so chronic that it can make you feel unworthy? It can make you feel fundamentally flawed and even arrogant. Can it become so chronic?
Absolutely. That's the interesting thing. Shame has a lot of things that we don't even really think about. It creates feelings from complete unworthiness
Mhm.
to total arrogance. And the reason, because most of us, when we think of shame, we've done something wrong, we're bad, we're horrible. So we think of it in terms of unworthiness in a generic sense. I mean, there are so many other emotions that go with it, but if you had to pick one, you'd say unworthy. I'm shameful. I'm not worthy of something. Where arrogance is trying to tell other people that you're really better than who you are, because
Mhm.
down deep inside you don't really want to know. You don't want people to know how poorly you think about yourself. So you're going to say, I'm better than this, I'm good. And so the arrogance really hides those feelings of, I'm not really worthy. I can't, whatever I do, I can't please my father. I can't please
Right.
my boss, whatever I do. And so we take on these opposite instead of like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm really not that person. We put on a different persona, which is arrogance.
Yep.
And
Yep.
this feeling that we really are better, and we want people to believe we're better than how we think about ourselves.
Yeah, so what you're saying, John, it's like a camouflage. You are, generally what I understand people connect to is I'm not good enough. I mean, I have gone through those feelings because I was a caretaker for my parents for 17 years, for my family. And no matter how much I did, end of the day, there was a little bit of guilt, borderline shame, thinking I haven't done enough. So I totally understand what you're saying, that it can become pretty chronic if you don't have people like you walk into lives, where you're trying to say, hey, this is how you've got to walk on a path which is healing, emotional healing. And on that note, John, I want to congratulate you for the very successful authoring of your book, Shame on Me, Healing a Life of Shame-Based Thinking. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think in that book you have very authentically, and you've been vulnerable, and you've mentioned your own chronic shame as a youngster, and you have stressed upon how much the much needed requisite is to move to emotionally heal from past difficulties and abuse. So, John, I absolutely applaud you for being this shining example of someone who has owned their shame, who has healed and triumphed over this very self destructive pattern. So, John, my question to you at this point is what, according to you, is that one effective and learning technique? And I'm quite sure there's so many that has helped you and can help our listeners to emotionally heal any bleeding wounds that cannot be seen from shame. Tell us your story. How did you heal yourself?
Well, that you brought up a great point, especially when you said the things that we don't see, because the interesting thing about shame is that we don't, there's so much of it we don't recognize. It goes, that like you were saying, you felt bad about your parents sometimes, right? A lot of these things are sometimes they're cultural. You grow up, you're supposed to act a certain way, and if you're not, unobvious, then shame is used to make you feel bad for poorly. So there's so much of shame that we just don't recognize because it just seems like it's part of life. For me, like I say, I was 53 when I realized that it was shame, and what I realized was it wasn't what people told me that I was this bad person or this whatever. It was the fact that I believed it, and I accepted all those false notions of I'm this horrible person or whatever. Mm-hmm. And because they were told to me by people whom I either loved, respected, or admired, that's we tend to believe them. So the best healing technique that I use with my clients is, to guide them through their emotional healing journeys is self-forgiveness.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I just want to kind of explain it because it's not always I just can't say I forgive you, John. I mean, you can, and it's that may be a place to start, but there needs to be something specific that you forgive yourself for. And in my case, like I said, people told me all these things that I believed. Well, what did I do? Forgive myself for believing those untruths, whatever you want to call them. They may not necessarily be lies, because people might believe that, say, hey, John, you are this kind of person. And so they're not feeling it's a lie, but you don't have to accept it. And so by forgiving myself for, that one man who told me I was this, I forgive myself for believing that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't go into this, but the story I told you, when I think about that story and when I retell that story to people, and when I talk about self-forgiveness, I actually have that, that butterfly muscle in your stomach that tenses up. Yes. It literally relaxes every time I tell that story. Now, I'm not saying that has to be everybody. You have to have this physical experience. That's, thankfully, with me, reminds me of how traumatic that experience was. And then when I go to no matter how animated I get telling that story, when I get to the forgiveness part, that relaxation in my stomach reminds me of, again, the healing, the gratitude, the thankfulness of all these things that I was able to get past it. So if I could, again, self-forgiveness for me is the most important. Not forgiving the abuser. We'll get there. We'll talk about that, and we'll eventually talk about whether or not that needs to happen. But for me, forgiving myself for believing all these untruths about me is the first place where I start.
That is so beautiful. And as you said that, I had this beautiful feeling of a certain baggage. It felt like I'd been carrying a suitcase on my head, and all of a sudden, John Dunia saying, Minnku, just let it be. Take that baggage and that suitcase off your shoulders, of your head. I always think of people who carry these burdens as sitting in a train, and instead of placing your suitcase in the suitcase area, you're putting it on your head and you're sitting on the train. So thank you for that, John. That felt so good to be able to just release this burden that we all carry and say, hey, you're beautiful, hey, you're good enough, and just forgive yourself. And I'm sure you have this structure going and you have this beautiful practice which you take your clients through. That's so beautiful. So this loving, this kindness that you talk about, I think it's the most important component of humanity and existence. So thank you so much, John. That was absolutely beautiful. You've handed over the one key that was so needed. And the one thing that popped out for me, John, that I wanted to share with you is that, and I don't know if you relate to this, but if you do not heal from what hurt you, then you bleed on people who didn't cut you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
You know,
Yeah,
the ones who were not quite involved in this. So you go around with this agenda of bitterness and grief and this emotional healing. So, John, are you saying that emotional healing is possible from the scars that shame brings?
I believe, me personally, that
Right.
emotional healing is possible
Mhm.
in any situation. If I didn't, I wouldn't be doing this. But here again, and this is what we spoke about before,
Mhm.
here, these wounds have definite degrees. You can get a cut on your skin,
Right.
right? And how do we know it's healed? Because there's no evidence of it. But what happens when you get a big cut, you have stitches, you have a scar?
Mhm.
What happens when you have to have an amputation? You don't have that hand. Okay, so it's a long healing process. There's possibly some physical therapy involved with it. You end up not having a hand. Again, maybe you might have a prosthetic,
Yeah.
but people who've had those incidences, they've been able to thrive from them.
Mhm.
Would they rather have their hand back? Possibly, but they're not going to. But
Right.
they're not going to sit around moping, okay, well, life's over, I can't do anything. They're going to do it. And so when we have these deep emotional wounds,
Mhm.
yes, they very well may be with us, just like the amputated arm or something,
Right.
but it
Right.
doesn't mean that those have to control us and hamper us to the point where we have no life, where we're enslaved to this shame or guilt or this abuse, whatever happened. And again, it's not easy, believe me, but
Yes.
those kinds of challenges are what I for some
That
reason they just become alive when I can help people
that
work
is so
through those.
beautiful. That's so beautiful. Thank you, John. I know this is a subject we can go on and on and on about, because I think sooner or later we all have gone through this emotion to some degrees. But it's, this value that you bring to our global audience today, to this beautiful tools that you shared so that, everyone can start living in dignity. I thank you so much for this, John.
My
But
pleasure.
now it's time to take a deep sigh and lighten the mood and jump into the
Okay.
rapid fire round. Let's
Uh-oh. All right. This is the
so just
scariest
relax.
part.
No, no, just relax. And this is where you get another chance to be authentic, bare your soul. And it's always one word or one sentence answers. And you're at the driver's seat, John. So you have the freedom to veer this vehicle to wherever you want. So let's start. Just a few questions. Okay, so the first question for you, and you could just complete it and give your answers. Joy for you is what?
Joy for me is oftentimes a choice that I make.
Oh,
It is, it's the little things. It's my cats that just runs around and plays. I get so much joy out
oh, I
of that.
love that. That's beautiful.
And yeah,
That's beautiful. Thank you, John. And what worries you more, doing things right or doing the right things? I know a little deep here.
that might depend on the situation,
Mhm.
really.
Mhm.
Um, because there are times when you want to stick to what you believe is right, but working together with somebody is more important than being right.
I totally resonate with that. Now, what's the one word you hate hearing? Is there one particular word that you hate most?
Maybe it's more a phrase, shame on me.
I was waiting. I was waiting where you're
That
going to pop that in. Yeah,
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 that
absolutely.
I don't believe anybody should ever, we do, we'll continue to struggle with it, but I
Yeah,
want people to know that
yeah,
they should never feel shame.
absolutely. So if you were asked to choose a spy code name, what would that be?
Well, I'm going to cheat. I already have one. And that's Shame Doctor, because
Oh,
I want to help heal people from the devastating effects from shame. And that's kind of already my alias,
oh,
my
that's
alter ego.
it did make me very curious. So that's absolutely fantastic name to have. So what is a prospective name that springs in your mind for the next book you will author? And I'm going to assume you will, because it's like a chain reaction. It starts, it really goes on.
Yeah, I will. What I've thought about for the longest time, although it is not the next book, because I want to write smaller books to help people, like little workbooks.
Yeah.
But I want to write a book someday called The Ironies of Life, that talks about how how certain ironic things. And I'm sorry that I don't have anything right now that I could just rifle off, because I've kept the list, but it's a bit that my nerves right now are keeping me from. But there's so many things in life that we just do that are ironic. We don't really think about it, but it's just those kinds of things. They keep life exciting, they keep it challenging, but it's part of our everyday
Yes.
existence.
Yes, and humorous. I always find that irony is humorous, and it could be joyful, depends on how you perceive it. So thank you, John. That was nippy, snappy, speedy. I love how this one went, and it went so fast. See, you can relax now. Any last word to the audience, and where can people find you, John?
Well, the easiest way to find me is my website, which is shamedoctor.com. That makes it convenient. And my email is john@shamedoctor.com. The only final, like I say, my only final words that I would say is that healing from any emotional abuse circumstance, I believe, is possible.
Mhm.
Not easy, it may not be simple, but it's possible. And I would implore people to never give up on that thought. Seek somebody out to help you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you I hope you enjoyed being here on this
Oh,
session
definitely.
today. Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So as always, I end with a quote, and today it's from Rumi. And he says, "Soul, if you want to learn secrets, your heart must forget about shame and dignity. You are God's lover, yet you worry what people are saying." And I thought that was so appropriate. John, join me in saying bye to our beautiful global audience. And
Thank you very much for having me, and bye-bye to everybody.
yes, and you lovely souls out there, thank you for listening. And I will see you again on a very special Christmas episode on the 15th of December. Stay joyful, stay safe, be in love, be love. Bye now.